it's sort of the white hat perfect virus if you had to engineer one.
Okay.
It's sort of the white hat perfect virus if you had to engineer one. That's what the dude just said, isn't it? Who's that? And why is that important to understand what's going on with Ukraine and why Ukraine came after COVID and what's been going on? Well, the guy on the left is Jesse Waters on Fox News, and the guy on the right is one of the leading scientists in the world. He knows all about COVID's origins. He's published papers on it, and I've been in email communication with him. He's Dr. Stephen Quay. In late January this year, Dr. Quay joined Jesse Waters on Fox News to discuss stories going around that Omicron had emerged accidentally out of research in laboratories in South Africa. Take a listen to their amazing conversation.
Research suggests and evidence suggests that they were doing experiments on mice in a lab in South Africa. We don't know which lab. Do we know which lab?
We do. We have some information from that. There are actually several laboratories, so we don't have that final bit of information. I just soon not go there on
I understand.
The exact location.
And they were trying to do experiments in order to get ahead of the virus, in order to make sure that a vaccine would help it, or doing research, and it escaped. Because that's what viruses do. Would this have been gain of function research in a South African lab?
Yeah, it's effectively is gain of function. If you're trying to teach a virus how to get around human antibodies, it's gaining the function to get around human antibodies. Growing it in mice, it's gaining the ability to grow in mice. So yeah, both of those do qualify as gain of function.
All right. Well, I guess the good news is this is a pretty weak strain. It's not a mutation as far as we can tell, as far as the research shows, and it's going to wash through and give I guess, hopefully the whole country enough immunity that this thing kind of decelerates and we can turn the page on COVID-19. Is that your understanding?
Absolutely, yeah. So it grows faster than Delta in the nose and the throat, grows much slower in the lungs. The consequence is that, it's very transmissible, the most transmissible virus we've ever seen. Basically, the sneeze heard around the world is enough to fill a room with it. But it doesn't go deep in your lungs to cause pneumonia. So it's sort of the white hat perfect virus if you had to engineer one.
Okay.
It's sort of the white hat perfect virus if you had to engineer one. And Dr. Stephen Quay should know. He's top class. So there were a number of laboratories in South Africa working on this, according to Dr. Quay, who's very well informed. And why would they have had some motivation to develop effectively an antidote to the COVID epidemic, which was still ravaging? Why would they have had any motivation? South Africa, that's why. Let me connect the dots. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Currently, the globalist New World Order is at war with Russia, is threatening China not to support Russia, and has been trying to lean on India to get it not to support Russia. Why is all that going on? Because RIC are bonded together now, Russia, India, China, seeing their collective interest in this Brics structure, which they've been putting together, these countries, over the last 10 years, an independent financial structure. And this Brics thing is as big as the EU, and it's launching its own currency. In fact, the opening gambits in the launch of its own currency has been Vladimir Putin's demand to be paid in rubles. That's the launch of the Brics international currency. Mightn't look like it, but at the heart of where it matters, in a huge commodity item like oil, and soon in many commodities, that's the huge geopolitical move going on right now, the emergence of the Brics nations. That's why all this is going on. So, let me show you one graph that lays out the implications for the New World Order of the rise of the Fair World Order as it's been described, the Brics. Let me show you in one graph what this is all about. This is a graph of the GDP of the BRIC nations from 2001 to 2026 on the right there, projected and estimated. Do you see how steeply that rises from nowhere to wow? So back in 2001, when George Bush declared that he was starting the global war on terror, China had a GDP of 1.3 trillion. USA, for comparison, has GDP in the order of 11 to 15 trillion, depending on how much you count in the vaporware paper financial GDP of the United States as real or not. But here you see that these nations had they had tiny GDPs, but watch as we rise. Where are we at now? 2022. China has a GDP of 18 trillion. India 3 trillion, Brazil 1.8 trillion, Russia 1.7 trillion, South Africa 435. This bloc has 3.2 billion people in it. It has now 23 trillion US dollars. It is equal in size to the combined size of the EU and the USA. And it has the fastest growing Brics economy, which is India. And population-wise, it is in India and China that the population is mostly concentrated. This is a huge emerging bloc, and here in Ukraine, right now, the New World Order is at war with Russia because it's the closest enemy in the BRIC nations that it can get its hands on. That's what's going on. The COVID lockdowns were planned to last till 2024. That's the reality. And only Omicron ended all that because it was so transmissible that it eliminated the justification for any restrictions on travel, for example, because it was everywhere. Within months, it was everywhere globally. A version that had been specifically tailored to bypass the defensive systems which were in place as a result of the vaccines and as a result of people's existing immunity, which they had with the existing variant. So a special variant was cooked up in a laboratory which was trained to get around these human and artificial immune defenses and to infect the world with a view to cutting the whole COVID epidemic short. And the COVID control structure was what was designed to provide the New World Order with the control of its domestic populations it needed in order to now go and wage war against Russia and China and, by default, all of the emerging fair world order economies. That's what's been going on. And unfortunately for them, the development of the Omicron variant terminated the control structure, and anyway, there was such resistance that we won that battle against the New World Order. The populations of the countries of the West won that battle. So nevertheless, the war goes ahead on schedule. What can they do but continue with the plan? And so we now have the war taking place. But it was supposed to be all so different. And now the chickens are coming home to roost in this geopolitical war. And here comes the chickens. German consumers to be hit by further price hikes in supermarkets. Published 1st of April, the same day that Vladimir Putin launched the alternative competitive international currency to the euro. And according to this report, we will see a second wave of price increases in double figures coming for German consumers. Aldi, Edeka and Globus announced that they will be forced to raise prices. At Aldi, meat and butter will be significantly more expensive from today, folks, as I record this video. This is the chickens coming home to roost, and nobody's talking to you about the real reason why Vladimir Putin wants payment in rubles. It's because Vladimir thinks that the only difference between euros and toilet paper is time. Eventually, all euros become toilet paper. That's what he's concerned about. Russia has priced the ruble at 5,000 rubles to gold. Russia's gone on a quasi-gold standard. The Brics are going on a quasi-gold standard. Why? Because they've had enough. They've had enough of debased currencies. So the reason he wants to be paid in rubles is not so that will save Russia the trouble of going down to the bank and changing the euros for rubles themselves and paying commission. No. It's because he doesn't want to accept payment in euros, which will have depreciated in value by the time they get to lodge them in the bank. That's why. Because the European Central Bank is printing money. They don't want to be paid for commodities, the Brics nations, in dollars either, because the Fed is printing dollars. And when you print more and more and more of something, eventually turns to toilet paper. So there are a number of different kinds of inflation, and he's just sensitive about that one. Currency depreciation inflation, that's what is the concern of Vladimir Putin when you offer to pay him in euros. I'm not so sure I want to take euros if you don't mind. I'll take gold, I'll take rubles. It doesn't matter either, because ruble is 5,000 rubles to the ounce of gold. This is the new reality. This is the immediate implication. There are a number of types of inflation. There is cost push inflation, which we're seeing because of oil. There is demand pull inflation, which we're not seeing much of because demand has started to ease off because of the economic realities. But in certain areas, you can't but demand stuff like food. People got to eat. So you got demand pull there in those areas where demand is just inflexible, like in oil to Europe in winter, for example. And then you have this structural currency inflation, which is caused by a constantly depreciating currency. Germany was supposed to be the bastion of stability for the financial future of Europe, and yet now the German-backed euro is not being accepted by the gold-backed ruble. Not interested in your weak currency, says Vladimir. That's the reality that this financial oligarchy at the heart of the New World Order has been attempting to avoid. That's the inevitable consequence of the graph I showed you. The new kids are in town. They're surging. And the New World Order's answer to that is war as a way of stopping the Brics. And all of this has been about that single core issue. Naturally, there's no way the TV journalist is going to respond to questions about why Vladimir is demanding payment in rubles by saying, well, probably because he's increasingly unhappy with taking our increasingly worthless currency. They're not going to say that. That's the reality. That's the truth that can't be mentioned. That this is economic, and therefore the implications for you, longer term, economic also. So it's not surprising the mainstream isn't saying that. What also is surprising, though, is that the alternative is not either. I mean, how many people are saying what I'm saying? That Omicron was a deliberately released virus, which was deliberately engineered to defeat the New World Order by the Brics Fair World Order? Nobody, I think. But then that's because there's a lot of conspiracy theorists have weighed in on issues in the last few years, ever since COVID happened, and suddenly everybody discovered conspiracy theory, which is great. I love to see that. But there's just conspiracy theory, and then there's doing arch conspiracy theory, which according to the South African Mail and Guardian, back in 2002, I was arch conspiracy theorist Fintan Dunn because I was fighting over AIDS in the same way that people have fought over COVID now. So in the last 20 years, I've only gotten archer. I've only gotten worse or better, depending on which way you want to look at it. So, you know, in order to be fully informed, you need to move beyond knee-jerk conspiracy theory and realize that, as I pointed out in 2005, most of the conspiracy theory on the material on the internet is put out by the New World Order. Repeat, and this was an unpalatable truth, in 2005 on the 4th of August, when I released that following investigation for a number of years of 9/11. It was disappointing, but it was a truth I had to tell, though it did result in becoming marginalized, that the majority of what you're reading on the internet that is anti-New World Order is put out by the New World Order to do what? To do what Russia have been doing with the movement of their forces in Ukraine, with the way they have constructed a pincer around Ukrainian forces. What technique are they applying there? They're shaping the battlefield by the movement of forces. And in the same way, the conspiracy material on the internet is designed to shape the battlefield. And the battlefield at the moment is to not talk about stuff like Brics, like we're talking about here, to not discuss what's really going on, but to leave you in the fog of war. I cut through the fog of war because I'm hardcore. And this is The Beautiful Truth with Fintan Dunn reporting. And I will be back tomorrow with more, and I do hope that you join me for that. And I'd like to thank and welcome those who have subscribed recently. And that's why I'm just giving a little bit of background on who Fintan Dunn is, because I know we have many new people subscribing. You're very welcome. Great to have you on board. We've been doing this for a while. There's quite a good crew over at breakfornews.com in the forum there, where you can read the musings over the last 18 or 20 years since 9/11 of those of us who have been following, tracking, and now watching the downfall of the New World Order. But we'll try to keep you advised of how that affects you. All right, be back with more tomorrow. Hope you can join me for that. This has been Fintan Dunn reporting. See you soon.